attendance tonight. I'd like to thank Mayor Ave 10Apr23, Tom Burgaster, Chief Satanoy, and Engineer Greg McHugh for attending. The purpose and scope tonight is to identify the issue of traffic safety. It has become a forefront topic in our city over the past several years, and is a citywide problem comprised of several issues over multiple areas. It'll take the cooperation between local and possibly state branches of government and bipartisan work to solve these citywide problems. Today's purpose and scope and goal is to simply identify the issues, inquiry about possible solutions and ideas to those issues, implement action to solve the problems, and assess the effectiveness of addressing those issues. If the effectiveness is not to the majority satisfaction of the citizens, together we will then begin the process from formulating solutions again and repeating the process until a reasonable, effective, and safe policy to the issue is found. Foremost, like to address the issues on Lake. In the past 6 months, we've had a vehicle rollover, another vehicle leave the road, and almost hit a house and a car, or I believe did hit a car. First, I'd like to open it up to fellow committeemen, Ms. Kramer and Aaron Bioland, if they have any questions, if they would like to bring anybody up to answer those questions, and that would be the time.
I guess I would like some type of report to break down of the accidents on Lake Avenue, the number of poles that have been hit on Lake Avenue, and I would like to hopefully reduce those numbers if they're as high as we have been told they are. I mean, I don't have all the stats in front of me. I think stats were presented possibly last year. But I would like to know, there has been additional accidents speeding on that street. So I would just like to have that information provided so we know where we're starting at and where we want to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kramer? And I'll open it up to other committeemen at this time.
I'm okay this time, thank you.
And to the rest of the council. Does anybody have any questions, comments about the issues that we've all heard about as far as streets in Iowa State? Ms. Smith?
One of the things I said is because obviously our police can't be everywhere at the same time in these high traffic areas. I never was really for it, but maybe a solution is, since the warning speed light doesn't slow people down, maybe we need to look at one of the ticketing speed lights. They would be sent a ticket in the mail, but they wouldn't receive any points on their license. I don't know how anybody else feels about something like that, but I mean, we have the same problem regardless of what we do. That's all I have to say about Lake Avenue.
Mr. Slutz?
Thank you. I would just like to say the majority of my complaints I get are from residents on the lake. Throughout my career on the police department, we've had numerous accidents. It seems to be more traffic on Lake Avenue now as it was, more than there was 10 years ago. So I appreciate the speed limit signs. I drive up and down Lake every day, 3-4 times a day, and I pay attention to those signs, and I pay attention to the cars in front of me. Just coming here, the car in front of me was doing 37 miles an hour, and they were just accelerating from Wales. So, I'd like to see something done before something bad happens, and I want to be more proactive than reactive. Whether it is a camera, like Ms. Harvey Smith recommended, speed tables, put a unmanned police car somewhere place we could do that would be the church at 3rd and Lake. Between Wales and Amherst, there's nowhere for the police officers to sit unless they back into a driveway and run radar there. Then we're talking about manpower problems within the police department, which every department in the United States has those issues. So, a lot of our accidents are between Amherst and 1st Street on the curve down there. But I notice a lot of the speeding between Wales and Amherst. And the majority of the calls I get are from residents there.
So possible solutions would be, I've heard it referred to as cop in box, unmanned police car. If nobody has any further questions, I'd like to ask Chief Stanroy to come up and give his take on it. Thank you for coming, sir.
Of course, my pleasure. Let me start off just by thanking you for having me here and actually,
Get your mic in, Joe.
let me start off by thanking you all, and I appreciate you actually keeping me in mind to bring me up, especially when it comes to traffic safety in the city of Massillon. It's important and it weighs on me when I hear the complaints come in. My tenure is only about halfway through the police department, at least I hope. I have 17 years on the department. And throughout those 17 years, there is ebbs and flows of traffic where it becomes a problem in certain areas. We try to attack that area, and what it seems to do is push it to other areas. I think, unfortunately, and this is no excuses, we have a culture of people who think that if the speed limit says 25, that means 30 is okay, or 7 or 8 over is okay. Lake Avenue is really a point of contention because that is a residential area. It really always was a residential area that has seemed to somehow succumb to being a major thoroughfare for people to traverse from one point to another, whether it be from State Route 21 to 241 or business travel. And so I understand why there are complaints and why there are concerns. Some of the things that you had just mentioned that you brought up about possibilities of how to attack these points of contention are traffic cameras. I did a little bit of research on that. I will never pretend to know or be an expert in all things as Ohio Revised Code, which is the giant book. But with that being said, one of the things that I noticed right away was it says that the stipulations laid out in the ORC says that the local authorities shall use traffic law photo monitoring devices to detect traffic law violations only if a law enforcement officer is present at the location of the device at all times during the operation of the device, and that the local authority complies with a specific section of the code. There are things that we just cannot pick up the slack on, and it's adding bodies to locations. I would rather have an officer sitting there just enforcing traffic than sitting by a traffic box and then having them automatically generate these tickets to mail to people. I would rather just put an officer there. You had mentioned staffing, I think Councilman Slutes had mentioned staffing. I only want this to be a crutch for this much of my tenure as chief of police. I want to get our staffing levels up to where I can't, come up here and honestly say that that's an issue. But that is an issue. I pulled some numbers that I think, and I'll wrap this up and get to a point as to why I think that these numbers are so important. When it comes to the amount of officers that we have at the police department, it's literally staggering where we sit today. That I think a lot of people don't know. I think a lot of people in the city don't really understand this. 24 months ago, we had 46 police officers in the police department total. One of them was a school resource officer. Less than 60 days ago, we had 34 police officers, and 3 of them were school resource officers. Now, why am I mentioning school resource officers? It's because those officers are tethered to the school 40 hours crews are on the streets that just by them driving around alone deters traffic offenders. So that leaves very little when it comes to manpower to set people in the hot areas of the city where we're experiencing a lot of traffic crashes. Now, luckily, we're moving in a great direction right now. And in fact, we've had a lot of support from the city to move towards getting people in the door. But I think it's safe to say that not a single person in here wants us to just hire anybody to be police officer. They have to be the right people to do the job. We want our officers to be the best, the brightest, compassionate, empathetic, passionate about doing the job. And that is a long process between the civil service test, background investigations, interviews, and then when we find a good candidate, we're going above and beyond by sending them to the academy for almost 4 months before they come out, just to then take another 12 weeks, 3 months, just to field train them before they're ready for solo patrol. The process is extremely lengthy. Less than 60 days ago, though, the first 3 that myself and Deputy Chief Meyer hired, actually 2 of them just got out of field training about 60 days ago, and 2 weeks ago, the 3rd one got out. So that puts us up to a total of 37 officers right now on the road ready for solo patrol. We still have the 3 SROs, which we need, but we also have another officer right now in field training. He'll be ready to go here by the end of May, hopefully. We have another officer that's going to be sworn in on April 28th when he turns 21. We can't swear him until he turns 21. I know you're probably thinking, my gosh, that's young. I agree it is, but when you find the right person for the job, if the law allows us to get him in as an officer, we're going to do it. And he's a pretty respectable young man. I think he's going to do great things for our department. Now, moving forward, we gave out 6 conditional offers of employment 10 days ago. 4 of those conditionals are in background investigations because they accepted. The other 2 are still in police academies on their own dime. They'll be graduating in May, and we hope to have them start field training in June. If everything goes as we hope it will, we will have a minimum of 48 officers ready for solo patrol sometime in December before the end of the year. Now, what does that do now? Well, it doesn't do a whole lot now. But we are slowly getting these people to a position where, 1, there will be more officers on the road out patrolling. That leaves the amount of interactions with the public, to be more of a common thing. When people say, why isn't an officer in my neighborhood? Well, it's because they're on calls in other parts of the city. Just because we lose manpower doesn't mean that the call volume stops. The calls coming in are still the same. In my experience, the number 1 deterrent to enforce traffic is having officers on the road actually out there, not constantly running call to call to call, having time between calls to go out and make traffic stops, to stop people. People see flashing blue lights in neighborhoods and areas. That is a huge effect on how they traverse around the community and how they travel. So I really think that the number 1 way that we combat anything is steady enforcement, not just locking in on hotspots all the time. More officers and steadily enforcing traffic year-round, and just getting them out there on the road. Our overtime numbers for the past year are staggering. I don't know if any of you have even seen these. They're over 11,500 hours of overtime last year alone because we were so short-staffed. It's not uncommon for officers to work 16 hours. Nothing worse than working 8 hours and then you're being told you cannot go home, you get to do another 8 for 16 hours. It's hard on mental health, and it's hard on officers who have an ambition to go out and do stuff normally. They get beat down. They just are trying to survive their 16-hour shift and get a break between their calls and typing reports. They don't have that same ambition to go out and write tons of traffic tickets. And that's just the harsh reality of it. I think that it'd be disingenuous for me to tell you otherwise, that they're hard charging every day, working 3 16-hour shifts a week against their will. Our sick times they're unbelievable. From 2019, where we had a total of 1,583 hours, 2020, when we seen the pandemic come through, we went up to 2,388 hours of sick time used. 2021, 3,191 hours of sick time used. 2022, 3,188 hours of sick time used. When officers know they're going to be forced into working 16-hour shifts because we have a lack of manpower to fill the shifts needed to be filled, they call in sick. And it just trickles down and it trickles down. And I know this might sound like excuses for why we're not out there hammering traffic left and right, but they are a reality. And I do think that we will see some changes in the city as far as traffic enforcement goes. I just received a letter today through email from the Department of Public Safety. Councilman Slutz is probably very familiar with grants and funding eligibility for traffic enforcement. They've been called STEP grants. They have various names. This is for fiscal year 2024. I was just notified of it. These things are such things. For our city, our size, they granted us 350 hours of traffic enforcement where they will pay officers at their overtime rate to come in and for anywhere between 4 and 8 hours just enforce traffic. That's all they do. They don't have to handle calls. We could not fill this last year. Our officers were working overtime. We put it up. Officers didn't sign up for it. They were not willing to work that because they were working the road, being forced to work the road so much. There will come a time when we have enough officers where they will not be getting offered overtime, and they will be fighting over signing up for these. It will come in the future. Back to Lake Avenue. I have numbers here for Lake Avenue. Since 2018, we've had a total of 13 crashes that were considered, severe crashes on Lake Avenue. And this is between 2nd Street up through 4th Street. Now, I can tell you we've had far more, but they're listed at like Lake and 21, Lake and 1st, and I can give you some of those numbers as well. Now, we see a lot of fender benders there. Lake and 21, anywhere around 5 o'clock, people just, they're not catastrophic injuries, but I can give you some of these numbers. At Lake and 21, since 2018, we've had 29 crashes. Lake and 1st Street, where it gets extremely congested and cars are backed up on the 21, we've had 59 crashes. Lake and Janice, 4. Lake and 2nd, 8. Lake and Cooper, 4. Lake and 3rd, 3. Lake and 4th, 4. Lake and Amherst, another busy intersection. We see a lot of rear end crashes there, 17. Lake and 8th, 4. Lake and 10th, 7. Lake and 11th, 11. And Lake and Wales, 30. For a total of 210 crashes, and that is since 2018. Of the crashes between 2nd and 4th to 13 that I stated, where cars were off of the roadway, and I heard some mention of those. I had a chance to look through these. 5 of those 13 were ODIs. There is a highly unlikely chance that whether there was speed tables, flashing lights, any kind of traffic deterrent, these people are drunk. They're drunk. That's why they're running off the roadways. That's why they're going into people's houses and yards. Unfortunately, I go back to the fact that that is a major thoroughfare through a residential neighborhood. Now, me saying that still doesn't give a conclusion to how we stop it. How do we keep cars from leaving the roadway? What type of traffic barriers or barricades could possibly be used to stop something like that? I don't have an answer for that. I think the engineering may have some answers to that, or maybe something that they could look into. We enforce the criminal laws on the streets as far as the design and the layout, how the streets are. I can give my input, and how well received it is up to the individual on the other end of that. So, it is my personal opinion that when we have the staffing in place where we can have officers out running traffic blitzes, like these step grants that I talked about, they give us hours on Halloween, Thanksgiving, the Super Bowl, homecoming. These are all went unfilled in the past years. And it emboldens citizens when they think they can drive drunk or they can drive recklessly because they haven't seen an officer in several hours. It emboldens them to continue to drive that way. And we're working towards getting to a point
statistics, the breakdown of accidents, the solutions. Councilman Slutz mentioned an unmanned police car. Mr. Slutz, do you know if the church is willing for that? Is that something we can do in the short term?
We have an extra car that we could use. We have an extra car that we use for side jobs, and there's no doubt in my mind we could put a cruiser up there. If that was something that was available, allowed by the church to put up there, I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like when people see a police car, they instantly slow down. So it's just one suggestion I have.
Well, I think it's a small price too, where if we even, we use, a lot of times we use our cars, we have a specific car that we use on traffic jobs because they idle for hour after hour after hour. We tend to use our older cars for that. I don't see any reason why if we set it there that we couldn't lock it and put it on idle with an officer still patrolling the neighborhood and periodically checking on it. I mean, this might be a question for the law department, but if it was locked, we could even leave our, what we call our alley lights on, or they're just a dimly lit blue light on. They're not flashing. It would gain people's attention.
I think there's definitely an implementation. I'd like to see follow through with it, if we can. Is that something we can do?
Absolutely. First off, we'd have to craft something as far as an agreement with the church, but that is, generally people are optimistic and wishful and wanting to help with the police in the city, so I don't think that's an issue. The issue, of course, would be what kind of traffic enforcement we can do. We'll have to look into that. There are certain tenets in the legal system that require you to be able to confront your accuser. So when people say things like traffic lights, some of those are unconstitutional because you can't take a robot to court and say, no, I didn't. So generally those, as Councilman Slutz said, those bots or those machines have to be ran by an officer that they can actually be brought into court and cross-examined. So we'll just have to look at the things, but I'm very optimistic we can do something.
Thank you for the clarification.
Was there one, I just happened to look down at my notes, and I thought that this was also important. Given the circumstances that we're on right now, I looked at our numbers from our traffic officer, and we're on pace to write over 2,500 tickets. That's just citations for the year. I haven't got the numbers actually from March. He was on vacation last week, so he'll be wrapping that up, but anywhere between 2,500 and 3,000 tickets. Since the time I've worked here, and I think that Deputy Chief would also agree, we make a lot of traffic stops during the year, and I would say a third of those actually result in traffic tickets. I think the officers take pride in actually that they are still establishing their presence by flashing blue lights and stopping people and letting the community know we're out here. They don't always have to give you that $160, handshake and smile when they send you on your way. I think their job's done just by stopping you alone. So we're still write a fair amount of tickets as an agency. So I thought that was important.
Mr. Slutz?
Thank you, and I appreciate that, and I give you all the credit in the world and our men and women that protect our city. You do a great job. But as far as the police car just sitting there, I don't think we need to leave the lights on. When an officer there is a manned car there, they're not sitting there with their lights on normally. So, I was thinking, put an unmanned car there. Maybe the next week, an officer has a few minutes to go sit there. Next time somebody comes through and they go, oh, last time I came through, there was nobody in that car. Now there is. So, it's just another tool, possibly with the lack of manpower we have now to address some of the problems that we're seeing. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
I would just to coincide with what Jamie and the Great talked about. If we were to do this route, I would see about putting that speed detector on the road as well to see the effectiveness of the actual deterrent. Their speeds built to the background, but
resident of Lake myself and seeing most of this stuff firsthand daily right out my living room window. I did have a meeting with Chief St. Noy, and Chief St. Noy was very helpful in doing what he could to get somebody to patrol Lake for a while. Now I understand staffing just couldn't keep this going for very long, but it was very effective. When they saw the police, there were, I think, 5 tickets in 3 days, right? 5 tickets issued in 3 days, and that slowed down traffic for probably 3 or 4 weeks. And when the police presence disappeared, people caught on right away. The other thing that I also want to point out, I know somebody had brought up to me that, well, we don't want to ticket our residents for going through there at a high rate of speed. You know, number one, Massillon City residents, if they don't want tickets, they shouldn't speed. But at 60,000 cars a week on Lake Avenue, I would doubt that most of those are residents of Massillon. I think they're transients from Jackson and Perry going to, getting to 21 and vice versa. So I really have no problem ticketing those, if somebody's gonna speed down that road, I'm sorry, I've got to live with it. I've got one of the few driveways that backs out onto Lake Avenue there by the intersection. Sometimes it's impossible, sometimes it's absolutely dangerous. I don't know how many times I've almost been rear-ended by trying to pull into my driveway. And it's just a dangerous situation. And I see families developing again. When I first moved on the lake 20 years ago, there were a lot of younger kids. When they aged out, well, now other families have moved in, and I see a lot of younger kids again. And I see kids trying to cross the street to get to school in the morning at 10th Street, and they are fighting traffic. Little kids fighting traffic to get to school. That should not be, okay? We have asked administration for additional traffic signals and things of that nature, which we've been, nothing's happened. Mr. Gleba has requested a guardrail be put up on the curve that he lives on to deter traffic. If somebody is drunk, they start to go off the road, it keeps them from going into his neighbor's property and destroying property and possibly hurting somebody. He was told no on that. There are also Chevron alignment signs that can be put up on that curve to at least let people know it's coming. It's a very dimly lit area. If you have a distracted driver, you can end up going off the road just being distracted. You don't even have to be drunk. So I do believe these things really need to be considered as well as deterrents to property damage and to injury. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. I'll come to you in 1 second. I wanted to bring up that we also previously discussed possible speed-rated speed bumps. I've visited other cities in other parts of the country. It seems like it's effective, it works well. I guess this would be more of a question for our engineering and maybe streets. Mr. Burgasser, Mr. Schrager, if you'd like to come up. I'm wondering if that's a possibility, if that's something we could do. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. I haven't looked into speed tables because of the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. It is a residential speed limit. I know other cities have tried to use them. I haven't looked at any statistics or costs even to place a speed table in there. I would like to go back real quick and answer Mr. Lombardi's question about the guardrail. I believe Ms. Sylvester put out, we did an analysis of Lake Avenue at Cooper. And according to the guidelines that we have to follow in the Ohio Department of Transportation, location and design manual, clear zone requirements are met. And clear zone means the distance from the curb, the clear zone back to the nearest obstruction. So meaning that it's on the curb, there's a 22.5 foot in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. Traffic volume of 12,000 cars, and the combination of the slope where, you know, the grade of the road, to prevent runoff crashes. That clear zone is met in the manual and to the design guidelines. So to add a guardrail, we'd be going against the ODOT's design manual, first off, and we could create a liability. That would be, I'd have to talk to the law department on that. Secondly, putting up a guardrail and a vehicle that would hit the guardrail could then be obstructed, bounce back into the oncoming traffic of the other lane and create an issue, you know, with oncoming traffic. So you have the zone met with no guardrail. By adding a guardrail, you could be creating a liability of forcing traffic back into the other lane, and into oncoming traffic, you create another hazardous situation. And then the sight distances between coming out of Cooper, that guardrail, you know, the height of the guardrail could block the sight distances of the location where you can able to look left or right, east or west to be able to pull out. But I just wanted to answer that part of it while I was here.
Thank you. Mr. Lombardi?
Thank you, Mr. Sneed. What about chevron alignment signs? Why wouldn't those be used there?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that again.
What about chevron alignment signs? Why would not those be used there?
It could be a possibility. It adds more signage to the road. Obviously,
It adds visibility to the curve,
It does.
which is not very visible, especially at night.
I could see that in some ways, yeah. I mean, it'd have to be analyzed whether or not to put the chevron signs there. I know we had one like on Cherry Road, but we've added the curb signs too with the blinking LEDs, so those were added, I think, on Cherry because of issues. But it's something we could look into that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Graham?
Okay, so going back to what you have on Cherry. So you have chevron signs and you have blinking lights. Has that ever been considered for the Lake Avenue?
I think we've talked about it internally. We just haven't made a decision yet. Because of,
Cost-wise? I mean, what are you
I
talking
couldn't, without, I'd have to go back and we'd have to, you know, figure what those costs are.
about?
I don't have
mean,
those.
that would just be like added visual for those drivers.
The only, I want to revisit the sign locations also, because there's not a lot of room in that lawn strip where we'd be talking, you know, where we said the guardrail would not be feasible because of sight distance. The more signs we add in that same area, it could create a sight distance issue. We don't want to create that, obviously. But I haven't looked at individual signs in that area, or adding chevron signs. There's different styles and types for that.
Any further questions? Charles Smith?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sneed. This is a question I'm not sure if you can answer, or maybe the chief. Is it a possibility of adding a couple more stop signs? That way people, you know, before they get up to speed, they have to stop again? Or, as far as the chief, or adding like signs that say high traffic enforcement area, just something else as a deterrent?
Stop signs can't be used to control traffic or enforce traffic speed control.
But if it's hard for people to pull out, and it's hard for, you know, to them to cross the street.
Currently, there's sight distance, there's no issues. If we start adding signs and guardrail, then it blocks the sight distances, is what we're looking at.
Any further questions for Mr. McHugh? Mr. Burgasser, would you like to comment on the speed-rated speed bumps?
Couple of things.
If we can install those? Or?
Just, first of all, echo what Greg said, that the ODOT manual of roadway design, 600 road design, safety devices that are themselves fixed objects, and while they may decrease crash severity, They may also increase the total number of impacts, and I think that's what he was trying to say. If you put a guardrail there and it bounces people back out into traffic, that could be a problem. Roadside safety devices are hazards and must result in a less severe crash than the hazard being shielded. So that was one of the reasons why we talked about guardrails and maybe not putting a guardrail right there. I like the idea we just put a turn lane with flashing lights down the southeast. I think that we could maybe illuminate it that way a little bit. You know, and I looked at maybe work with Greg to try and figure out exactly which sign might be the best, and then we'll maybe bring it back to you guys to vet it with you guys, see what you think. I did do a little bit of other research. I actually was researching traffic tables, and I came up with a whole different area of issues. Lakewood, Ohio has a traffic calming program. Grove City has a traffic calming program. Columbus has a pace car program. I'd like to talk about that for a minute. Dublin, Ohio has a traffic calming program too. City of Columbus looks at it more globally, and the pace car program is done much like a neighborhood watch program. It starts with the individual residential streets. Lake Avenue is a bit of an anomaly. It's a residential street that is not really residential. But in the other residential areas, they have it's called the pace car program, and maybe you want to take a look at it. It is a means by which neighbors actually involve themselves in the initial participation. So you sign a pledge that you're not going to speed, and then, you know, as the neighbor, Grosvenor for some reason comes to mind, or perhaps 3rd Street on the southeast side. So, you know, your neighbor sees you going up and down the road, hey, you signed that pledge, man. You know, it's kind of like that kind of policing a little bit. And then they also have they step it up, they ramp it up. They go all the way to speed tables in certain areas. But it allows for residents to feel like they're doing something to help hold folks accountable as well. And the number one person they hold accountable is themselves. I'm not going to sign the pledge unless I'm going to participate. I'm not going to maybe call out my neighbor unless I've already signed the pledge. And in the residential neighborhoods, you know, I don't think the chief wants to put people on those residential neighborhoods or on those residential streets because you're going to be ticketing residents. Again, Lake Avenue is an anomaly because it's a residential area that isn't really residential anymore. And so, you know, you looked at the city of Dublin. One of the things that they talked about, you know, they did put the speed tables in. And they found out that their ambulance patients were actually complaining of head and neck pain that they didn't have by the time they got to the hospital. And Lake Avenue happens to be a major thoroughfare for ambulances. So they decided that they were going to change their situation. They're coming out with actually November 9th of 2021, they started looking into it. They've got 3 different stages of, number 1 stage is education, number 2 stage is enforcement, and then number 3 stage is engineering design. And that could be all the way from a roundabout to some sort of an obstacle in the roadway or something of that nature to try and get people to veer left or right. And I mean, I think really we need to look at, you know, a whole lot of different aspects here. I certainly think we need relief right away, and maybe the first relief is some sort of a sign. Maybe we need to look at the possibility of a speed table or something like that. But again, I just worry that Lake Avenue in and of itself is the anomaly that a speed table might take care of, you know, on a 3rd Street Southeast or somewhere else that it's not going to take care of on that road itself. One of the things that Dublin found, again, was that in between the speed tables, they found that people were actually speeding faster to get to the next speed table to slow down. I mean, it really, I wish I had better information, but there's a lot of downside to each and every one of these things. I'm not sure I see a downside to the signage other than there is a lot of signage right now. But I think that's the one thing we could probably look at most immediately to address that, and as we wait on Chief and his increased personnel to be able to provide a more substantial way. I have the City of Dublin, the City of Columbus's things here. I can share them with you. I think they do have some good ideas, but again, every good idea does have some bit of detraction as well. So thank you for my 10 minutes. If you have any questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burgasser. I'd be derelict if I didn't mention, as board councilman, that I receive regular complaints on Sippo, Woodstone, Main Street, and 28th particularly. It was requested, we have a children at play sign as you enter the neighborhood. However, it was requested to put another children at play sign down towards the end of 28th at that intersection. Can you, I know this is kind of putting you on the spot, but can you elaborate why we could or could not do that?
Yeah, I'm going to follow the manual of uniform traffic control devices, but I'm going to read you from Dublin, Ohio. A request in neighborhoods is that the installation of children at play signs be added. National and statewide traffic studies have shown that children at play signs are not effective in increasing the driver's attention to the point of reducing vehicle speeds or reducing pedestrian accidents. In fact, placement of these signs can increase the potential for accidents by conveying to children and parents that the area is safe for children. For these reasons, City of Dublin does not use children at play signs, and we encourage parents and or guardians to find alternative play areas for children, such as backyard or local parks. Now, I know you're not talking about children playing in streets, but we would be going against the manual of uniform traffic safety and control devices, which says, do not put those. We really try hard to discourage putting those. I think I placed one in the 2 years that I've been here because someone threw, such a fit that it just wasn't, it seemed like the right thing to do after all of the rhetoric. But I really recommend that you do not do that. It does go against what the manual of uniform traffic control devices say. We actually have to special order them. We don't have them. In terms of the other issues on 28th Main Avenue is another one, like you indicate. It seems to be, it is a residential neighborhood. It just seems to be a thoroughfare. And I wonder that there might be some method of signage or other means to try and do that. Perhaps, the PACE program of Columbus. Again, in those areas, I don't think you're getting just those residents of Main Street who are on there. I think you're getting folks traveling, in and out. And again, Chief's enforcement program probably would be well served there as well.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from any council? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lombardi.
Thank you, Mr. Slee. Mr. Burgasser, I brought up the possibility on the lake of putting in traffic signals at 10th and either 2nd or 3rd, because there is no crossing, no safe crossing on that street until you get down to 1st Street. At Amherst and Lake, with a dual protected turn, it's impossible for anybody to cross unless they're fast. Trust me, I've tried it. The lady who lived in my house before me was hit twice at that intersection trying to cross it to get over to the grocery store. With the expansion of Wales, that's going to make that even a busier intersection. It will not be safe to cross. So for 1.75 miles between 1st Street and Wales, there's no place to cross Lake Avenue. So I had suggested, and I think it fell on deaf ears, that we put a signal in at either 2nd or 3rd and one at 10th. It also helped to control the traffic and help side traffic to be able to get out easily. As we just heard Chief St. Louis say, the maximum crashes were at 11th Street. We have a nice little flashing yellow sign there. We see what good that's doing. You know, we put a signal along the street there somewhere, then that traffic can funnel through to 10th and come out and get out on Lake safely. Children can get across the street safely on that end of Lake, and then on the other side of Amherst, down at 2nd and 3rd, we'd have another area that they could cross.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear. When you say traffic signal, are you talking about a stoplight?
Yeah.
Are you talking about not
Yeah,
a stoplight, but a stop?
With guarded crossing as well. Like we have crossing signals on First and Lake, which ironically, not a lot of people cross at. There's more people crossing that are really jaywalking up in my end of the street, or crossing at Lake and Amherst, and jogging traffic basically, because like I say, there's 2 protected turns there. There's no time traffic is actually stopped, so somebody can actually cross safely.
So my department, Mr. Lombardi, is tasked with the physical operation of installing those things, but engineering usually does the traffic studies and those things to determine that. I work with Greg to try and figure out how we can best address that.
I'm just going to make the comment, Tom, sorry. Just to make the comment, and Tom made the comment there, is the traffic study would be required. Because you're talking about.
I requested a traffic study about, I think it was about a year and a half ago. And it got shut down because one of the residents complained on it. Stuff moved, they shut it down.
So what we're talking about is a traffic warrant study for a mid-block crossing or a signal. So that's, I mean, there's different aspects of that. If you're talking to add a signal or signalize those intersections, then you need a traffic warrant study. If you're talking about adding a mid-block crossing with signage similar to what's downtown in the middle median, that would still require a study.
So is there a reason we couldn't do that?
It's a possibility. If someone wants to make a request of which intersections you're talking about. I've heard 10th, I've heard 8th, I've heard Lee, I've heard 3rd, I've heard 2nd. I mean, you're talking, I don't know, up to 5 studies right there. And then
About 2 years ago, I requested 10th and 2nd.
I wasn't aware of that. I apologize. I wasn't aware of that.
And that's where I would be interested in either 2nd or 3rd, whichever would be more. I think 3rd might be more feasible because it's more centered in the block.
And 2nd and 3rd, though, are offset. Well, I'm not thinking Cooper is in between 2nd and 3rd, right? Or is it 3rd and Cooper? 2nd's a little bit further west.
Yeah, it would be 3rd and Cooper, yeah.
Well, I'll make note of it, and I'll talk to Ms. Sylvester and the administration and see where we can proceed, but like I said, I've never been requested that, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McHugh. Mr. Burgess. Any further questions at this time to any member of the administration that's present? I think 10-minute break might be in order. So before we begin our next meeting, I would like to reschedule and follow up on some of these solutions and implementations. Would Monday the 15th at 5:30? Yes, Mr. Lombardi?
You know this is probably a little bit off agenda. Chief St. Louis would like to know if Captain Meyer could give us an update on the XM program, 3 minutes.
Okay. Do you want to do that now? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, first let's set the meeting. If we could set the meeting for Monday, May 15th at 5:30 p.m.
A regular committee meeting, a regular council meeting,
This will be a committee meeting at 5:30.
the 1st and the 15th are council meetings.
Shouldn't matter. I mean, we can have that before our regular council meeting.
Okay.
So if it begins at 6, our regular council meeting, begins at 6:30, we can have this at 5:30, if that's okay. I mean, unless there's any objections from council, which I don't see any. And we'll follow through with that. You said Chief St. Noe would like to come up and speak on the program that we voted on?
Captain Meyer.
Oh, Captain Meyer. And Lori would like to come up with an update as well.
Good evening, Council. This is just a good time. I was going to talk about this a little bit later to share with you, and it was with a lot of the work from a lot of the officers in the police department, along with Captain Meyer and Chief St. Noe's passion, that I'm pleased to let you know that we did receive a grant for a little bit over $152,000, which will go into to help pay for the Axon, actually, for the first year. It was for body cams, things like that we could apply it for. It took quite a while for us to be notified to get it applied. It was about 6 months or so. But just made aware of that. And I know that some of the council persons had talked about grants in the past. Now, this is just this year. We'll continue to source grants in the future for that, but this will take care of that portion of the Axon for this year. So I just wanted to share that good news with everybody. And I wanted to thank Deputy Chief. He keeps showing me his little, his badge here, but for all his help too, because he's actually one that found it, so. And then we turn over to him.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you for letting me come up and address you. I wanted to give an update. It was a big undertaking for the city to purchase this. It was a lot of money, and so I want to make sure I give an update. Like our budget director just stated, we did receive a grant we applied for back at the end of the summer. Officer Aiello did a very good job with working with the state of Ohio to get all the proper documents sent to them, as well as work with me and work with the Axon reps to get that $152,000, which was a decent size. When we looked at that grant, the grants were anywhere from $10,000 to about $250,000, which was like a city like Toledo getting the $250,000. So I'm very impressed with that. Just an update on the system. We have received our body cameras. We have received our tasers. We underwent training last week for the trainers with about myself and 6 other officers and supervisors, as well as some folks from the law department, and as well as some folks from the city that would help us with records, retention pieces. We are expecting to have the body cameras and the tasers where the rest of the officers of the department and everybody else from the law department, as well as the city that we need to know, our secretaries, everything fully implemented by May 1st. We have to do some training with them, about an hour on the body camera or so, an hour and a half, and 2 hours on the tasers to get our officers updated on the new tasers because they're a little bit different than the last ones. The in-car cameras, the supply chain kind of fell short on us and manufacturing and all that, so we won't see the in-car cameras until the end of summer, beginning of September, which they're going to come in and install and give us another additional training. So we actually score extra training on that, but everything seems to be working pretty good, and we're really excited about this program. There's some things that I wish I had known when I was trying to give my speech earlier. These cameras got cards in them for Verizon and AT&T, so they put their own hotspot out so that we talked about the live feed of the cameras. They're built in, and that's part of what we pay for is those little Verizon or AT&T cards that are in each camera has one. So it was just something neat I found, and some other things we can do where we can send, when we get a public records request, we can send you an email link, and you can just go right to the internet, and boom, you're watching the video that you requested. So some really neat things that I really didn't notice that we were going to have. So does anybody have any questions about that program? Or comments, or?
I just want to say thank you. I know it was kind of hard. I totally supported the Axon program, but I was also kind of hard on you about the cost of it and how we were going to pay for it. And so I'm very pleased. Thank you for all your hard work.
You're welcome. Anything else? Appreciate your time, thank you.
One question real quick. Is there a way that we could advertise this where you could ask to help expand the department as well? Because I know that's a nationwide issue and that's something we're trying to do.
So I think we could probably, as we do our recruiting, mention that we're using Axon. Some of the pieces that we'd like to add in the future, as time goes, is more Axon equipment for like our drone program, which is going to be a great program for us to use as recruiting tool as well, and as well as our our interview rooms, possibly using Axon cameras. That way our digital evidence is in one place. Where we take a picture, it goes to Axon or evidence.com. So the younger officers really enjoy the cameras. We did have a couple of younger officers in the training willingly, voluntarily, didn't have to ask them. They're like, yeah, I want to help. And they've been helping set up on cameras, so I think that is a piece that we can utilize. I think maybe Axon might be the techiest of tech stuff when it comes to police work. They do have a robot too.